I see a lot of familiar faces in here. I'm Sherman. I'm Director of Disability Services at the college. This is Ron Relia. He is out at the Lake Shore. He is a counselor. He is a disability counselor. He is a one-man do-it-all, Meyer one-stop out at the Lake Shore.
Student services, jack of all trades person for the college, pretty much. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for coming. We started late this morning too, so we kind of scrambled, and there were a lot of questions and lots of anecdotes. You know, we don't mind answering questions as we go. It does make it a little more difficult to get through everything. So, you know, if you've got something that really needs an answer at a specific moment, that's great. If you want, you can also wait till the end. And just, you know, a couple of things I wanted to mention in the beginning. One is, everybody knows that the theme of today would be differently if it hadn't been for this Office of Civil Rights Complaint. You know, we'd have a whole other topic to discuss today. But Ann and I both work on these sort of issues. You know, we're on different committees, and we get to other colleges and have a lot of years dealing with disability concerns. Overall, this place does a pretty good job, a real good job by the standards of most institutions, and that includes everybody here. So just because we're having a special day to talk about this, I don't want people to get, you know, too concerned. You know, we really do all right for the most part. The other thing is that when you have, whenever we have a discussion about disability issues, you never have any idea what kind of background people have, if they understand the definitions, if they know the legal stuff. And of course, we weren't privy to what Irene was going to be speaking about before it happened, so some of this stuff you may have seen already. Okay, so some of that we'll probably not spend as much time on as we might have under different circumstances. You want to start that video?
Yep.
Okay. We're unveiling the video.
Yes, this is brand new. It was just finished before we left in December, and it's not captioned yet.
It's not captioned yet.
Hello, and welcome to Grand Rapids Community College Disability Support Services. This video will highlight important information about our office and highlight our services and program. Located on the 3rd floor of the Student Community Center, Disability Support Services is part of the School of Student Affairs under Counseling, Advising, and Retention Services. The mission of Disability Support Services is to ensure equal access for students with disabilities to all curricular and co-curricular opportunities offered by the institution. For every qualified student with a disability, we commit to provide the following. First, equal access to education and co-curricular programs, services, activities, and facilities available throughout the college. Second, reasonable and effective accommodations, academic adjustments, and/or auxiliary aids determined on a case-by-case basis. Finally, confidentiality concerning disability information except as required by law or with the written permission of the student. We provide academic support and accommodations for students with documented physical, cognitive, psychiatric, and learning disabilities, as well as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
College can be a lot more challenging than high school. If you're a student with a disability, the Disability Support Services staff would like to make sure that you have some of the important tools you'll need to make those challenges easier to overcome. And for students like me who want access to accommodations, they make it really easy to get started.
GRCC adheres to Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the ADA Amendment Act. These laws protect the rights of individuals with disabilities in a post-secondary education setting. The ADA defines a person as disabled if he or she has a physical or mental impairment which substantially limits one or more major life activities, has a record of such an impairment, or is regarded as having such an impairment. The college is committed to educating faculty, staff, and students about their respective roles and responsibilities.
Here are the steps for requesting accommodations. The student must provide documentation from a qualified professional that describes his or her disability. There are published documentation guidelines, depending on the student's disability, available online or in the Disability Support Services office. The next step is to schedule an intake appointment with a disability counselor or advisor to discuss the student's disability and how it may impact the student in the educational setting. If accommodations are requested and approved, the student will be given an accommodation agreement. To receive information about accessing specific accommodations, students will be encouraged to attend a Disability Support Services orientation. Students who plan to use accommodations in the classroom will need to show their accommodation agreement to their instructors.
Each student is provided with an individual accommodations agreement form, and it's the student's responsibility to inform faculty members of the approved accommodations. This form indicates that the student is registered with Disability Support Services and lists all of the approved accommodations that they have access to at GRCC. Every qualified student with a disability has the right to the following: equal access to educational and co-curricular programs, services, jobs, activities, and facilities available through the college. Reasonable and effective accommodations, academic adjustments, and/or auxiliary aids as determined on a case-by-case basis, appropriate confidentiality regarding information pertaining to disability, and finally, every qualified student with a disability has the right to information in course materials in accessible formats.
Every student with a disability has the responsibility to meet the college's qualifications, including essential, technical, academic, and institutional standards, identify as an individual with a disability and request accommodations in a timely manner, provide documentation from an appropriate professional source verifying the nature of the disability, functional limitations, and the rationale for specific accommodations being requested. Also, follow specific procedures for obtaining reasonable and appropriate accommodations, academic adjustments, and/or auxiliary aids. Students should also discuss any problems that may occur with accommodations with their instructor and their disability support counselor.
Providing equal educational opportunity is an important and shared responsibility at Grand Rapids Community College. We recognize and value the potential of students and are committed to meeting the needs of all students, including students with disabilities.
GRCC has the right and responsibility to maintain the college academic standards, request qualifying disability documentation, have an interactive conversation with the student to select appropriate accommodations, adjustments, and/or auxiliary aids. GRCC also has the right to deny requests for accommodations when disability documentation does not identify a specific disability or fails to verify the need for the requested accommodations, constitute a substantial change or alteration of an essential course element program standard, or pose undue financial or administration burden on the college. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act provide direction and guidance to the college as it reaches new levels of access in all areas.
Faculty play an important role in the accommodation process. Faculty members have the responsibility to provide equal educational opportunities for students with disabilities, hold all students to academic standards set by the college and department or program, refer students to Disability Support Services when students inquire about how to obtain accommodations, ensure that students receive in-class accommodations as indicated in the Student Accommodations Agreement, assist in providing course materials to students with disabilities in accessible formats, and include a statement on your syllabus that notifies students about disability accommodations available and encourages students with disabilities to use their approved accommodations. Faculty members have the right to deny requests for accommodations if an accommodation agreement is not provided by the student, contact Disability Support Services to discuss the implementation of approved accommodations, and expect students with disabilities to adhere to the Student Code of Conduct.
Grand Rapids Community College is proud of the services and support we provide our students with disabilities. We are continually striving to ensure we have an accessible campus environment that is inclusive to all individuals. To learn more about disability support services, please visit our website at www.grcc.edu/disability or call us at 616-234-4140.
One thing I really want to emphasize is that this is a collaborative effort. This is a college responsibility, and you should never feel like or be made to feel like you are in this alone. And we will do everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen. There are a number of things apparently on the horizon in terms of resources and trainings, because this can be a little bit of a scary topic for people, and they're kind of uncertain about, how to go about things. So there you go, Ann.
There's a presentation that takes much longer to do that tries to help you understand a little bit more about what it feels like to have a learning disability, but I wanted to just do one of the exercises out of that just to give you an idea and kind of get you thinking for a minute. If you look at the words on this table, I'm sure that all of you would say, yep, I know all of those words and I know what all of those words mean, right? Now, let's look at those words in a paragraph. All of a sudden, those are the same words, but all of a sudden, this paragraph is much more difficult to understand. And I'd be willing to bet that, with maybe the exception of a few math and science, maybe Frank, there's probably not a lot of people that really, truly grasp what this paragraph says. I know I have no clue. And yet it contains all those words that you all just said that you know and that you know the definition of. So one of the things to keep in mind when you're thinking about a student with learning disabilities and how they, Irene said this morning they're kind of wired differently and they process things differently, is there was a whole list of words that you all said you knew the definition of, and yet I bet most of you are not clear on what this paragraph is saying. And so it's the same with a student with a learning disability, and they may be reading the words, they may even know what the words mean individually, but then when you put it all together, this is what it might be like for them. So it was just kind of a little exercise to get you kind of thinking about, how all this learning disability stuff works.
Okay, you've seen all this stuff before today, probably in terms of definitions of disabilities, but there's a little quick review. The fact that students must be otherwise qualified, means that they have to meet the academic and technical standards of the school or the program, et cetera. Of course, here, there are no admission standards as far as academics go to speak of, so in some cases we get a more challenging clientele than we may get in some other institutions. When we try to define reasonable, and that's typically what we do in our office, that's most of what we do, try to define what's reasonable. That can be kind of challenging. Remember those three things, though, that are supposedly not reasonable. That a fundamental alteration in the essential nature of a program or curriculum, if an accommodation would pose an undue financial or administrative burden, or there's a direct threat to health or safety. As far as I know, the Department of Ed has never accepted an argument for undue financial burden under Section 504, ever. So, and one of the reasons that we do exercises like this is we kind of, we'd like to give people a small glimpse of what the world is like for some of the students who come into your classroom. And in addition to that other list of suggestions that you probably got in a booklet today or during an earlier presentation, we would really like you to consider really thinking about what it is you're trying to measure. And what is really the outcome you're after, and how much of you're asking people to do is peripheral and how much of it is essential. And personally, I would also like you, if you could, to at some point try and embrace universal design for education. The better we do things on the front end, the fewer exceptions we make later. So just my 2 cents about that. What is not an accommodation? Well, we saw service horses today, this morning.
And Michigan State has one.
Michigan State apparently has a service horse.
Has a service horse. I found that out this fall at a meeting that I go to in Lansing.
Sometimes when students come in, especially when they come in from K through 12, where in some cases the school district you know, provided some of these other things for them, they don't understand what's an accommodation and what is technically not an accommodation. So services that are provided by the college that are available to everyone, like tutoring, is not an accommodation. However, the student taking advantage of tutoring may need to be accommodated in some way so that they, you know, are able to have equal access to the content. Personal services like service horses, again, we have to allow those things in most cases, but we don't provide them. You know, people have to provide for those things on their own. So, again, you've been bombarded now with this kind of thing too, with what are the laws and that sort of thing. We always, as I said earlier, we always include this stuff because you never know just how much exposure people have had to all of these things. But, and you heard the statistics about what percentage of the American population identifies with a disability. Those numbers are a little bit different depending on what source you're getting your information from, but they're consistently in the teens and in the 35 to 40% for people who are over 65. And as I point out sometimes, you know, ability, however you define that, is really kind of a fleeting state. And that when we go back a couple of slides and look at that ADA definition of disability, you know, in some way that applies to elderly people and to small children and to infants. So this is the kind of thing that touches everybody. Probably will touch you personally at some point in your life if it hasn't already, and will clearly be, you know, part of the experience of people you know. So this is sort of a historical overview of some of the disability rights stuff. And since I'm old and I remember some of these things, you know, in 1964, disability rights were specifically excluded from the Civil Rights Act. When in 1973 the Rehabilitation Act was finally passed, Nixon vetoed it twice before he signed it. And then HEW under Califano in the later 70s didn't want to implement any of its provisions until he was essentially shamed into it, you know, by public protest. So, and then during a Reagan administration, they tried to deregulate because they thought 504 was burdensome to business. So some of these things are hard fought, hard won, and kind of tenuous. Just to give you a little bit of a background. Title II and III with the ADA are the main concerns here that have to do with public domain and public, state, and local services, public accommodations. So I think Irene touched on this morning too, that at this level, all the applicable laws are civil rights laws. K through 12, IDEA is an education law. So there are some differences here. And you think the primary differences between the K through 12 stuff and stuff at this level are, you know, think about eligibility versus entitlement, access versus guaranteed outcomes. That's kind of the major difference. What do you think? We've rounded down with some of our numbers here. And these are roughly 600 are the ones who have gone through the whole process, you know, self-identified, asked for accommodation. In reality, that number is a little bit higher. These are the numbers from fall of 2012. And I think the actual number for, you may remember this, the number of class sections was more like 1,730 or something like that. Yeah. You know, if you look at the largest categories of students with disabilities here, they line up in the exact same order, even though we call some of it otherwise health impaired, and Irene's slide had it labeled something else. They line up in the exact same rank order that the national figures did. However, in the fall of 2012 here, the first three here on this list, the learning disabilities, the attention deficit disorders, and the psychological or psychiatric disorders, have almost equal numbers. They're all within several of each other. And when we're talking about otherwise health impaired, we're talking primarily about chronic illness and things like that. And this, when we discussed this, and over, you know, with the break and everything, we haven't had a chance to discuss all of this a lot, but when Ann and I first discussed this, we thought we should kind of let you know about some of the trends, because when you first started doing this, I think the students were almost entirely had physical impairments, probably.
Yeah, otherwise health impaired.
Otherwise, yeah. And then eventually, you started to see a big wave of learning disabilities and attention deficit disorders. And now you're starting to see more things like people who are, have autism spectrum disorders, serious psychological concerns, and a lot of chronic illness. 20 years ago, would you have thought of migraines or fibromyalgia, as a disability? So what this means is that we're getting more and more into situations where we can't put things in place in advance. If I have to braille something for a visually impaired student, I know that I need to do that ahead of time. Specific learning disability, there are a certain number of things that are probably going to be necessary based on their diagnostic information. I have fibromyalgia. One day I decide I can't get out of bed for 2 weeks. I don't know that's going to happen in advance, or if I know it's going to happen, I certainly don't know when. So we find ourselves, and this will affect you, there becomes a lot of negotiating because we're dealing with things after the fact. And that, those are the students that are increasing in numbers here, where we have to react as opposed to be proactive. Yes?
Well, one of the things that I've encountered is that I was thinking with migraines, fibromyalgia, many times it's not the student who contacts us. It's a mom or a dad, a loved one. What are the legal obligations there? Can we talk to a parent? Can we? I mean, technically, we're not supposed to.
Yeah, if a parent is calling to tell you that someone's been hospitalized, then, to say, okay, well, thank you for letting me know or whatever. But I would be myself, and of course I'm clearly not an attorney, but I would be concerned about discussing anything further, like, wow, this is going to be really impact him because he already had 5 absences or whatever. I wouldn't go there at all. What I would do, though, is encourage the parent to have the student as soon as possible, or even the parent could call our office and we'd tell them what kind of information we needed. Because really, unless a student is registered with our office, you're not obligated to provide accommodation. And in most cases, unless it's the onset and this is the first time and they're going to be diagnosed with severe migraines or some other chronic illness, chances are they already knew that. So they had the opportunity to register sooner. So, and that doesn't mean that you shouldn't, try to give them a little space and maybe help them with, I could give you, a couple extra days on that paper because I know you were in the hospital or whatever. That's fine. But really, you're not obligated to do that until the student's registered with our office. And in most cases, chronic illness is not being initially diagnosed when they're here in school. They already knew.
Okay. Now, can the student authorize the parent to speak on his or her behalf?
Yes.
If the student sent you an email and said, I'm in the hospital and I'd like you to be able to speak with my mom about my assignments or something, then sure. I don't see a problem with that.
And if they're working with a disability support office, that's part of that intake process too. You kind of, see, you say, is there anyone that, you sign a release, or you
really
refuse
just
to,
for
and
us,
then we don't
it's
talk
not
to
for the
us.
college,
Yeah.
but clearly a student could say, could email you and say, I am registered with Disability Services and they have a release, so they can talk to my mom, and could you talk to them? And then mom could tell us what she needed to tell us about what was going on medically, and then we could maybe communicate with you about what we would like to see if you'd be willing to do. We expect him to be in the hospital for 3 days. He's telling me, I had this with a student, I don't see the instructor in here, but I had this with a student last semester, and actually it turned out not to be the case, but she told me she'd only had 1 other absence, had all of her assignments done up until the point where, she couldn't be there. And then wanted to know if I could intervene with the instructor to see if there was anything that could be done at the very end. Like, could she get a W so she could take the final when we came back. Well, it turned out she'd had multiple absences and hadn't turned in most of her assignments, and kind of turned out to be a whole different story. But the idea was that, you know, she called me and then I called the instructor to say, you know, and I didn't start out with what can you do to help her. I just said, I've been contacted by this student, I'm working with her, you know, how's she doing in your class? And then I kind of got the whole other side of the story, which really I was sort of expecting, because this particular instructor would not have done the things that she said he did. And so I was already a little suspicious when I called, and sure enough, there was a whole lot more to the story. So,
As there often is.
as there often is.
Yeah. But the point here is that, you know, the growth, percentage-wise and in raw numbers, is coming from these areas where things are going to be kind of unpredictable, and something will crop up that we couldn't anticipate, and then we have to make some decisions, joint decisions in some cases, about what's appropriate. Yes?
Two questions, but you answered one about financial. We have no idea on that one. So the other question I had is, what is, and I don't know how much you can talk about this, what happened, because we keep hearing about the complaint, but I don't know I don't even know specifics, but in general, can you tell us what happened? Because in my work with your office, we've never had any problems. Everything's gone smoothly, and I thought we were doing a good job. Now I'd like to know what I should not, or what I might not have done at some point.
No, you've done great, Bernie.
Yeah.
The problem is, you know, I can't, you're doing
Wasn't
good,
you.
Bernie. I can't tell you anything specific about the complaint, but I can tell you that it's around technology.
It's access to
So
technology.
all the things that we used to do, like when you guys let a student come to take a test and you help them find a note taker, or, you know, you're willing to sit down with their tutor to explain how you do a certain kind of problem or whatever, all of that you guys have been doing great for years, and that's not where the issue is. What's happened, though, is our technology in the last, what did she say, 6 to 7 years or whatever, has exploded. And we're using Blackboard, and we're running out to YouTube and grabbing things that we're using in class, and textbooks are coming with study guides and stuff like Econ Lab and My Psych Lab and that kind of thing. And we're posting things out on Blackboard, and we're having discussions on Blackboard and online classes, and we're doing all of those things, and all of a sudden that has just like exponentially exploded, and all of a sudden that stuff is not accessible. So if I'm a blind student and I get on with a screen reader, I can't read most of that stuff. If I'm a deaf student and I'm looking at your video that you just happen to pull out of YouTube, and I know that they caption a little bit, but the accuracy is pretty poor, there's no captioning for me. So, or if you've got some kind of a podcast that students are supposed to listen to in your distance learning class, it's not captioned. So as a deaf student, I don't have access to it. Some of our learning disabled students that use reading software, again, the software can't, and I'm really bad at computers, it doesn't interface well, and so it can't always read it. We've got a student right now, and we went in and looked at some material she's going to look at next semester, and her screen reader goes over and it touches each one of the links, but for some reason it won't open them. So we're working with the publisher on that to try to figure out what's going on. But it's that kind of thing. That's really what this complaint is about. All that stuff that you all have been doing great for years, you're doing great. And you know, and a lot of you call us and say, you know, I'm going to be doing this, how can I make that work for so-and-so? We appreciate that, that's great, that's the kind of collaboration we want. And so this technology piece is something that the college, this is the beginning of it, is this day. And there's going to be a lot more coming over the next few months, and I think we'll see quite a bit this semester in terms of setting up an infrastructure that's got help for you, resources and training that you can go to. If I'm showing a movie, Bernie, and I know it's not captioned, who do I call about that? How do I get it captioned? If I know that I'm using my study lab for culinary arts 101 or 5 or something, how do I know if when I open that, if that's going to be inaccessible to a screen reader? There should be someone you can call to check on that, or a process that you could do yourself to say, oh, it's not, now who do I go to? All of that stuff hopefully is going to be set up over the next few months and year and so on. So we don't expect you all to solve it immediately, and you know, but all the other things that you're doing great. You know, there's a lot of this stuff that we've been trying to do, and that we've been kind of, my dad was a great one, you could fix anything with duct tape. That's kind of what I feel like we've been doing over the last 5 years with technology, is going through rolls and rolls of duct tape, trying to find workarounds, and could we pull this out and put this here, and could we hire a student to read that, and so on. But really, this accessibility thing is all about independent accessibility. So if I'm deaf, I should be able to click on that podcast, the captioning should come up, and I should be able to do it all by myself. If I'm a blind student and I'm using a screen reader, that whole, not just the material, but the whole platform that it's set on, my screen reader should be able to get me in, and I should be able to click on it and go to the links and listen to the thing and do it totally independently without having to have someone help me. So it's really the technology piece that's the focus of all of this, and we're all going to be learning together.
And it's the institution's responsibility to provide those resources and the training
for you. And that really was part of the response to the resolution, was the OCR very specifically wanted to know what kinds of training, what kinds of personnel are we putting in place to meet this need, so that the college can help all of us do what we need to do to provide the accommodations to the students. So don't leave here today feeling like if everything isn't perfect next semester, heads are going to roll. The idea just is to be cooperative, to ask questions, to be willing to talk with us, and we're all going to get through this one step at a time.
Yep. And don't own something that isn't yours to own.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk about documentation a little bit. And, to preface that, you have to another trend in the disabilities world is that, it's in terms of documentation, we're shifting from sort of a medical model or an illness model to more of a functional model. And in bigger picture, disabilities are being seen more and more by people as a social identity rather than an illness. So, and I suppose that when we're doing reasonable documentation, then our worldview on that spectrum is somewhere in between. Somewhere in between you're ill and need fixing, and it's a social identity. I guess what this means in some ways, and Anne, you can elaborate on that, is that having every I dotted and every T crossed as far as documentation goes isn't as important to us and to the larger disability support world as it used to be. We used to be very firm about how old something could be, or in some cases what instruments are used, and those strings are loosening a little bit. So some of this is good. It allows us to do more things for more people, and I think in a more of a macro sense, we're at least now partially acknowledging, societally, that maybe systems need fixing, not individuals, to some extent. So. And there's some pressure, even though it's not completely there yet, for things to be more seamless for a student's entire education, because right now the way we do things is quite a bit different than they do things K through 12. So,
the idea, I think, as we've moved forward, 504, as Irene said, was all about the physical stuff. That's the first time I'd seen the guy with the sign on his wheelchair, and I thought that was awesome. I can't even get on the bus, let alone be relegated to the back. There were, when 504 first came in, there were colleges that had the Disabilities Office on the 5th floor in some rickety room that used to be a janitor's closet in a building with no elevators. Like, really? They did that? But they did. Or it was in the back of some building way on the other end of campus. All the classrooms are here, and disabilities is way down here by, facilities and parking or something. And so first it started with that physical accessibility. And then when ADA came along, it really looked a lot more at education. And then when the amendment came in 2008, it really said, let's not focus so much on what's wrong, but just on what are some of the limitations that we see, and then how do we address those? How do we find accommodations? And it doesn't guarantee success. It just means that we want to give them the same opportunity to show you that they've mastered the material that other students have. Yes?
This is backtracking just a little bit, but I'm thinking, if a student comes to me and they've been diagnosed with cancer and they have to undergo something, or all of a sudden their kidneys are beginning to fail and they have to undergo dialysis, it sounds like we would try to make exceptions and accommodations for them. What about the person who's an alcoholic or a drug addict? Those are registered as diseases.
Technically, my understanding, and again, keep in mind I'm not an attorney, but my understanding is that if they are actively using, then they're not covered. If they are in recovery from drug addiction or alcohol use, then they are covered. Is that your understanding, Ron? They can't be
Yes.
actively using?
Yeah, that's the way I've always understood that. The other, and this came up a little bit with Irene today too, and we mentioned it this morning. You know, we kind of grow up thinking that to be fair is to treat everybody the same. And really the goal and what is fair with a disability and an accommodations situation is to treat everybody differently. And it seems kind of counterintuitive, but that's really kind of what we're trying to do here. So each situation is considered you know, an individual and separate kind of thing. So sometimes we get worried about precedent, but I think that's overblown, you know, because each situation is kind of an individual situation. So.
And again, if you have questions about a situation and you're wondering, should I approach the student or something, you're always welcome to call our office. You can call me, you can call Ron, you can call any of the other counselors or advisors in my office, and we'd all be happy to talk with you. And sometimes, I don't think we got to that part yet, but sometimes when we're reviewing documentation or we're making some decisions, if we as individuals have some questions, then we get together as a group, the 5 or 6 of us, and talk about what it is and kind of come up with a rationale and think it all the way through, and then that's what we decide to do.
Yeah, and
so
we'll listen to what you say too. I mean,
yeah.
it's not
Oh,
like
yeah,
we can't have that
definitely.
consultation. You know, just a handful of things that sometimes sound harsh when you say them. You know, you have no obligation to any student who hasn't followed the college process and doesn't bring you one of those disability accommodations agreements. Yes, Mike.
I don't know if you want questions at the end or not, but what
Yeah, we can take them as we.
about some of these aspects of disabilities that maybe don't need to be documented right away, like the service dog that comes into a classroom with a student who has severe allergies. What if there's a conflict between two? And the message that we had this morning, and I think it was even more forceful last night with the adjuncts, was you can't touch that. You can't say to that student, why is that dog here? That dog has to leave.
I think what we.
Weigh one student against another.
I think what we do in real life is probably put the student with an allergy in a different section.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
as
we
just
would
a
address
practical
that. So you
fix.
could bring that,
Yeah.
you could call us up and say, you know, I've got Henry Jones in my class, and as you know, he has a service dog. He said he works with you, but I have, you know, Julie Smith, and she says she is, I mean, already her eyes were watering when she came up to talk to me. She is really allergic.
Well, do you single one of those students out to
you-
say, or will somebody say,
No, it can't be
"This
either.
is a hostile environment for me because you made me get up and leave class, and you didn't ask the dog to leave, but you made me leave"?
Well, but you're not making that person leave. In that case, that person is choosing to leave,
They're
and
choosing
they've
to.
chosen
Here's your
not to
option.
come forward
Yeah.
and follow.
Here's your reasonable option.
Yeah.
If you
And
decide
so,
not to.
or maybe if I knew that the student was real flexible, and maybe you said to me, you know, and Julie, I really can't move her because she's got physics and this and that, and there's labs, and you know, I might just say, well, let me talk to Henry then. Maybe I can move Henry out of that class and put he and the dog in another class. That's one of those, when we were looking at proactive and reactive, that ends up to be one of those reactive things, because you and I both have no way of knowing that Julie's going to be in your class so allergic that she's already coming unscrewed and she's on the other side of the room. Her face is, you know, her nose is swollen, her eyes are running. We didn't know that, but now we do, so now we try to act quickly. What can we do? Who can we move? How can we make that work?
Yeah.
Yep, call us. And we do have a service animal policy, but
We do,
ours
yeah.
that's in place really
Says
talks
nothing
about
about horses.
dogs.
Yeah, says nothing about horses.
The horse thing is new.
I think Irene mentioned this morning also. You have no inherent right to know what a student's diagnosis is, you know, unless there's going to be some situation in class where somebody may have to be transported or, you know, something like that. You have every right to know what they're approved, you know, for and are eligible for. As, you know, a practical matter, who decides what's reasonable, at least initially, is someone like Ann or myself. If we decide that's reasonable, you can't just unilaterally say no.
But
We
you
can
call us
discuss
and
it,
discuss
yeah, and
why
we
you
want
have
to
a
discuss
concern
it.
about
You know,
it.
yeah, if you're concerned about it, we can talk about it.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yes. In the corner?
Mr. Brand.
Oh, I can't see you back there.
Last session, I had a student contact me who said he had MS and needs to meet with me before class Monday. So I'm online right now looking at what all the different things are that could relate to MS and how that relates to him in my class. Now, my question is, I can't really make any assumptions about whether he's worked with your office or not.
You can ask him.
Yeah,
I'm
in that
gonna
he's
ask him that.
in that he's disclosed that, you can ask him.
Right, so I could ask him, are you working with it? I mean, he needs to be.
Yeah. Are you working with the Disabilities Office? Because if you aren't, you really should be, because that's the only way I can provide accommodations.
Your office would make the determination of, you know, whether it's site,
Yes.
different things.
Yep.
Accommodations I have to make.
And it can be different for everyone and at different stages in terms of the progression of the illness. Yeah.
I guess my point is, either he's early because he's contacting me a day before class, or he's kind of behind in terms of now my class is about to start and I'm just learning of this. There shouldn't be any assumption on my part that your office is going to contact me and say, there's a student in your class
No.
who needs
Right, we wouldn't. No.
I would if it were a seizure disorder and we thought something might happen in class, or if I knew they had a service animal. I mean, we would do that.
If I put an interpreter in the classroom, I will always
Mr.
let
Young
you know.
has a question. Or a comment.
Back on the dog real quick.
Yeah.
Because I've seen a situation that happened about a year and a half ago involving a service animal. Will we be getting something from your office saying that these are the things that you need to do to prepare your class for this service animal? Is the first thing, and then is there something that you provide for that student to say, hey, we know this is what's required. We know you have the ability to bring this animal to the classroom, but this is what you need to do to make sure that animal. And I say that because the last service animal that I had the contact with, it was a dog, and the dog smelled
Awful.
It smelled awful, and it was hard on everybody around. You know, so is there? Did you say to them, hey, this is what you need to do to make sure that you know, that we're taking care of your needs, but this is what you need to do also?
Technically, the last I knew, and I got kind of a different feeling from Irene this morning, is the last I knew, service animals did not have to be registered. However, if an instructor called and there was a concern about a student, we would certainly contact them. Now, the college has said, and it says so in our service policy, that you know, a certified leader dog or seeing eye dog or whatever can be there. And if a dog has met that level of certification, then all the things that dog is supposed to do should in theory be in place. They should sit quietly, they shouldn't be barking, they shouldn't be paying attention to other people in the class. They're supposed to be, you know, fairly well groomed and so on.
Yeah.
Then there are students that ask to bring dogs that are in training, and usually they'll be wearing a little saddle thing that says pause for a cause with it, and that they're in training. That we do not have to allow in. The college has said as long as the dog is well behaved and not disruptive, that we'll permit them to come in. But if an instructor called, you know, I was having, I think, a side conversation with somebody, or maybe it was this morning, I can't remember, but you know, if the dog came in and someone was allergic, oh, it was Mike. If that was a pause for a cause dog that was not certified yet, they hadn't finished the training, we could say, you can't bring the dog to this class because Julie's severely allergic. But if that were a fully certified service dog, then I'd have to figure out something else that I could do. But if you've got a dog that smells terrible, give our office a call and we'll certainly contact the person, because that's not acceptable, and that wouldn't meet the criteria that they set forth when they certify those animals. And if you get a horse, let me know, because I really want to come and see it.
Just want to come and hang around in class. That happens. We have that conversation sometimes
too. We have those conversations.
We just decided to include some of the forms that the office uses. So you're probably, and some of these things, you know, are changing from time to time. And if you have suggestions for changes, you know, we can entertain those.
Yep.
I have a procedure question.
Mm-hmm.
We'd always done it the same way for years, and then about 4 years ago, and it seems like we've changed back. Historically, the process was, and it seems to be again, that students need to bring me the form.
No. If they're bringing you the form, they may be bringing it in and asking you as they're filling it out. But the procedure is, they either submit that first form. Can you go, is this the one, or can you go? Yeah. The student either submits this electronically or they can bring it in with paper and pencil to the office where Becky is. But you don't have to sign this anymore. In the old days when we had the blue sheet, you had to sign it. Now they may be coming to you as they're filling it out and just asking you, what again was that date, or what time are we starting? But then after Becky gets this form, whether she gets it electronically from the student or in person, then you get, go ahead Ron if you would, then you guys get the electronic form.
Okay. But I've heard several times last night and today something about the students need to identify themselves to you.
That's the accommodations form. That's coming.
Okay, because
That's
I
this.
rarely get that anymore.
The accommodations form?
What I get
You have every right to get that.
is the email from Becky saying this student is getting accommodations, you know, just before the test is coming up,
Yeah.
and I didn't even know that I had a student in my, so I couldn't be prepared ahead of time.
And Becky wouldn't have known that the student didn't tell you.
Wouldn't have known that.
That-
So I guess I'm asking then a clarifying question. A student who is in my room, who's in my class, who is to receive accommodations, should have identified his or herself
If
early in the class
Yes.
and let me know what kind of accommodations they will be receiving, such as testing, time and a half, which I'm absolutely troubled with,
Yep.
before Becky sends me something.
Right.
And ideally, and that's what we tell them when we meet them at intake, is it's your responsibility to show this to the instructor. I tell
You
them
don't
I would
see
show
one
it
of
to them the
those,
first
you have
week.
no obligation to them.
I have seen almost none of those.
You have every
No, you have
every
every
right
right
to see
to
that.
ask for that.
So if Becky sends the request for testing and we've never seen that,
You still can see the form. You still
You
need
can
to see
still
the form.
see the form, but at that point they would have given us the 3 days notice that they're required to give, and they are registered with our office. You can let Becky know when you send it back, the form, that this is the first I knew, and then we'll grab that student by the collar and say, hey,
You have to
you
show
didn't
that.
talk to the
The
instructor.
first time, like 3 years ago when the process changed and I contacted Becky, but what I was told was, this is the new process and they don't
No.
have to bring anything to you. I think it was a communication.
Oh, it
issue.
was, because you're thinking, she's thinking the old blue sheet you had to sign.
Right.
But yes, they should be bringing you
They
the other
should be
sheet, and
bringing
we
you
tell
that
them that.
accommodations
I would
agreement.
ask, however, that you not take the sheet from them, because we only give them one, or if you want to make a copy or something. But sometimes I have students come back and go, well, the instructor kind of took it and I didn't really know how to ask it back, and it's like, well, and we have a copy always in their file. So if they tell you, oh, I lost it, I don't know where it is, then go back to the Disabilities Office, because we always have a carbon copy in their file.
Really important information.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
not happening very well.
Right.
Yep. Well, then we'll make sure we emphasize it more, but feel free. In fact, you could say that in your opening statement. If you, yeah, if you are going to be requiring any accommodations, you need to be registered with Disability Services, and then you need to let me know that you are registered. Now, yep, yep. Harold?
I think some of the reason why we take that sheet is that students many times will show up at class just after the first test usually, and then hand that to me in class, and I think it'd be much more advisable for them to come see me in my office or something like that, because I don't have access to that copy machine right there.
Yeah.
Well, and some students are real proactive, and they'll go home, and I'll say to them, if you want to give this to your instructor, go home and make 3 or 4 copies. Keep one for yourself, and then you can hand them out. But a lot of students just, as students will, wander in with it the first day. Yeah.
Pregnancy fall, that's never to regrade the situation. Ohio 122 lab, a pregnant woman who doesn't want to go into the cadaver room because of the exposure to the smells and the potential chemicals. It's in the syllabus as a requirement of all students who participate in viewing cadavers. Technically, really, I should have sent her to you to get a disability evaluation under those circumstances and some type of medical.
But see, technically, pregnancy is not a disability.
I realize that,
But
talking about exposure, that it is potentially. And
well,
it's all this very gray zone situation.
you know, if there was something where for some reason she was reacting badly to any kind of strong odor, and the doctor felt that this was like maybe a danger to the pregnancy or something, then that would be kind of a whole different thing. But just pregnancy in and of itself is not a disability.
She was concerned about exposure to the fetus.
To the chemicals that were in the air?
They're called
Strategies.
And are they dangerous?
Yes. But the reality is they're available to them, and she and her husband, who by the way was a physician, made a decision that she wasn't going to go in.
Is there a mask that she could wear? I mean, those are the kinds of things I guess we'd want to explore.
But I guess in the future, I feel like I'm just going to send her to you, you can tease it out.
Yeah.
Because at the time, she was meeting all the requirements, and I did the best I could to, you know, and she had talked to supposedly one of the faculty along the same lines. But it's a very interesting dynamic.
It is.
Yeah.
What compounds the problem is that we really don't know what effect those chemicals
can have on the development
on, you know, particularly in the last trimester.
So that might be an occasion then where an auxiliary aid, like a mask of some sort, that would then be the college's responsibility to buy. So you would want to send that person to me. I would get whatever I needed that said, yes, indeed, that was a concern. And then my office would make sure that we purchased that. It wouldn't have to come out of your budget. It would come out of mine.
And isn't this an example though where it gets pretty complicated?
Yeah, it's a lot. There's a lot of gray area.
Interacting with the cadavers is pedagogically a requirement of the class.
Fundamental requirement.
Learn the skills you need to learn. If you don't do this, then we really can't make an exception because we're significantly altering the learning outcomes of the class.
So I would say we're looking at three possibilities. One is wear a mask. Two is withdraw from the class and take it at a different time. Or if you were pregnant when you signed up for the class, then, I mean, again, we're back to the mask, but I mean, you kind of knew that going in. Now, of course, you could get pregnant during the class, and that's different. We got to be done. I'm getting the signal from Art.
Well, for the second time today, we started 15 minutes late, so it's hard to, you know, get our... We really do want to emphasize our availability, too. You know, I will meet with anybody in any format at any time if you have any questions about things.
And if you guys have concerns about something that's on the accommodation sheet and it doesn't seem like it's straightforward or whatever, you're welcome to give us a call, and whoever's counselor that is happy to talk with you about how we can make it work or what we can do differently.